All right, welcome back. You are on the Dan Time Podcast. I'm your host, Dan McArdle. If this is your first time checking out the show, I'm so happy you're here. You're in the right place. I don't always reintroduce the premise of this show, the meaning of Dan Time, so let me take a moment to bring it back front and center for those of you just joining us. Every week, I bring you a new guest, somebody who is making a difference, making an impact, changing the world around them for the better, and somebody who I think that you ought to hear about. The one thing that most of them have in common is that they're all, like me, named Dan. Now, very few of us were actually named Dan at birth, although I met one kid who was absolutely named after one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Not everybody's a Dan. As you may have noticed, I've had a Chris, a Vic, and of course, Jim Powell. On a show like this, we've got to mix it up in order to avoid what I like to call Dan fatigue. We've had a Danny. We will have your traditional Daniel at some point. And coming soon, we will have at least one Danielle. This is not a boys' club. The fact of the matter is, I've just not been able to confirm a female guest to date. But I'm working on it. If your name is Danielle and you've been listening and you're thinking, geez, Dan, why didn't you say something? I've been waiting for the invitation. Well, I've said it now. So reach out to dantimepod@gmail.com if you'd like to come on the show, regardless of your first name. So that's the general theme. Want to leave you thinking, laughing, and hopefully inspired. Today, my very special guest is Dan Harrison. Dan is a Nashville-based singer-songwriter who fell in love with the South and country music while attending college at Wake Forest in North Carolina. Dan's songs touch on themes like new experiences, falling in love, going for something you've been thinking about for a while, pressing play, giving it a shot, jumping in, being confident in yourself. And he connects places, textures, sights, and smells of the South, which are very unique, to memories. Dan's vocals really have an effortless quality and charm. His choruses carry it to another level. I could do an entire segment just on the single Nowhere Bar. I think this should have been a number one hit back when it came out in 2019. When you hear Dan sing Carolina at about the 2.5-minute mark, I think you'll know what I mean. His songs are just optimistic. A lot of good stuff on the radio right now, but not quite what Dan's offering. And what I mean by that is you'll hear some downer songs when you're driving around that don't really have a takeaway at the end. So you're thinking, all right, I don't really feel a lot better than I did when that song started. Dan's singles, on the other hand, they've usually got a good spin to every situation he describes. Like in Running Out of Radio, we might run out of cash, out of gas, out of time, but we'll never be running out of radio. Dan was awarded the 2023 ASCAP Harold Adamson Lyric Award for Country Music. His song Friendly Fire won the 2021 ASCAP Jay Gorney Award and 2022 Bluebird Cafe Golden Pick Award. Dan has released music as both a solo artist and as part of the duo Salem Town. His songs have been featured on Spotify's New Boots and Wild Country, Next from Nashville, Fresh Finds, and Fresh Finds Country. He's also got songwriting credits on the viral TikTok song All Hat, No Cowboy by Bells, which has hit 4 million views. All right, the new single is We Went South. You can download it on any music platform. It appeared on Spotify's New Music Friday playlist when it was released September 15th. Now, whatever genre that you're really into, when you hear this song, I really think that you're going to feel like you got an advanced copy of something that the rest of the world just doesn't know about yet. Follow Dan on social media, on Instagram, X, Facebook, and you can find the video to this song and any other singles. All right, let's hear some of the new song, We Went South, and then get to my conversation with Dan. Folks, it is Dan Harrison time.
It'll be 4 years this summer. U-Haul boxes all over the hall. Every now and again I wonder where we'd be if we stayed that far. We were looking for something better, didn't want to waste any more time. Never thought that we'd find our forever if we stuck around. So that's why we went south on the interstate, headed straight for that small town. Didn't know where we'd lead, but I guess we know now, 'cause we found a picket fence and a patch of ground to settle down, planted roots down in that dirt. Thank God how things turned out when we went south. Yeah, we went south. Didn't have us a whole lot of money. All we knew was we were chasing a dream, where the magnolia trees and honey so sweet. We found everything we'd ever need when we went south.
All right, folks. Well, I am just thrilled today to bring to you Nashville-based singer-songwriter Dan Harrison. Dan, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. Appreciate it.
Everybody, I want you to know something. Dan Harrison is another example, just like last week, of somebody that I really want to have on the show. He's got a story that's a little bit outside the box. He's a country music artist, but he's not your typical born and raised in the South singer-songwriter. Dan, I'll stop there and just kind of let you introduce yourself to the listeners, where you came from, how you got interested in music, and where you are today.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Again, you having me on the show. It's very cool. I was telling this to someone yesterday, actually. Like, I feel like I don't know that many Dans. I grew up, like, I think I was the only Dan that I knew. There was another kid I grew up with named Dan, but he went by a different name. So I love the concept of this podcast. I just wanted to say, there's Dan's doing great things out there. But no, so I'm living in Nashville now. I've been here a little over 5 years. Originally from Philadelphia by way of Los Angeles. I was born in LA and I moved to Philly when I was about 5. I still have a lot of family on the West Coast though, and I love going over there. But grew up in Philly and went to college down in North Carolina, Wake Forest, go Deeks. Made my way over here after that, after a couple of years back home, and then came down here to Nashville. So that's the quick overview of it.
Now, Dan, did your mom or your dad play an instrument in the house, or your brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I have 2 younger brothers, so not formally. I had a piano in the house, and my parents forced piano lessons on me when I was a kid, and I really, really wish I stuck with them. But it's I guess different when you come to it yourself versus it's forced on you. But I definitely understand the value in that now. But no, my parents were always musical. My dad was self-taught, and he had some demo tapes, I think, from back when he was a kid in the 70s and 80s that he recorded on cassette probably. And he had the dream of that, but I don't think it's ever something he seriously pursued. And my mom liked to sing, but there was no family band situation, even though technically all of us are musical, and both of my brothers separately are very talented. My middle brother's a very talented drummer and DJ and kind of electronic music producer. And my youngest brother is also a great guitar player and songwriter. He's kind of in a different space. He's like indie rock and jam stuff, but we all have musical things, and we joked about the family band thing, but wasn't ever in the cards for us. But yeah, so definitely music was always a big part of my life from as long as I can remember, even just certainly appreciating it, and the stuff that my dad would listen to in the car growing up. I remember like it was yesterday.
Now, did you have somebody maybe in high school or around that time period who was encouraging you, maybe an older person saying, hey, you got something there, you need to follow up on that?
Yeah, I mean, my parents were always very supportive and encouraging once I came to it on my own. And I had friends in late middle school, early high school getting into guitar, and I was just like, well, that's pretty cool. And they were the ones showing me had Jimi Hendrix, AC/DC, Van Halen, Queen, and stuff like that. And they were playing I'd never seen an electric guitar. My dad had an acoustic guitar, and I thought it was cool, but it was it felt like very old school. And then my buddy got one of those Squier Strat packs, those really, cheap, kind of starter kits. And I was over one day and I was like, that looks awesome. I want to do whatever that is. And he was like, thanks. Smoke on the Water or something simple now. Yeah, that's so I kind of got encouragement from there. And I had some great music teachers at the school that I went to that I probably annoyed the crap out. In fact, I know I did. Just with noodling and stuff like that. I did jazz band and took music theory and music history stuff, and just it wasn't really specific to guitar, but it was just generally encouraging in music. And then I had obviously guitar teachers that once I told my parents I was serious about it, and I'm still connected to some of them, and they're great and really were really helpful.
Now, was there a time where you enroll at Wake Forest in North Carolina? Did it come down to like two or three schools, and you might have stayed up north or gone west or done something, and the story may have been different?
I think about that sometimes. It's definitely possible. Wake was an early decision school for me, so that's where I went, and that's where I applied first, and that was it. But I looked at a number of other schools. I thought about Berkeley, but I didn't. I ran track pretty seriously in high school and wanted to in college, and they did not have a sports team, and sports teams I think of any kind. So I didn't want to go north and be in a city. So Berkeley was kind of off the table there, and I hadn't heard about Belmont or MTSU, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with those schools, but two fantastic schools in the Nashville area that are hugely influential in the music industry here and beyond in terms of kind of the programs that they have and the people that have come out of there, both on the business and creative side for the industry. Just Hardy for one of them, from MTSU. Brad Paisley went to Belmont. I mean, the list is just ridiculous from both of those schools. They pretty much run this town, which I always thought put me at a disadvantage, but thankfully it doesn't. And I feel like most of my friends anyway that I made here went to those schools. So I kind of feel like I went there anyway without having gone there. But no, I mean, it's possible I could have gone somewhere else. I thought about the West Coast too, warmer weather, but I just fell in love with Wake as an overall school. I always wanted to do music, but I still wasn't at that stage that I was like, oh no, this is exactly what I'm doing. I thought like I would just go to school and figure it out and then maybe do music after. And I just really wanted to have the best college experience and learn, and obviously athletically and academically. And I'm very happy with my pick. I don't know. I might have still ended up here, but I don't know when I would have ended up here or how exactly. It definitely wouldn't have happened the same way. And I might have not been exposed to country music the way I was and when I was, and as it affected me. So who knows? Yeah.
Well, that's a great time. Everyone can usually remember, and it's usually the college years, the college age years, where you have that crossroads, or you meet certain people, or you have a girlfriend at the time that influences you in one way or another. But Dan, so I understand that at Wake Forest around that time period, you figure out that you like some country songs, some country music. Maybe it's a relationship that you're in and you're just hearing a lot of it. Take me back to some of those days.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much you nailed it on the head. Like it was just being down there at that time. I went to school. I graduated from Wake in 2015, and just around that time is Eric Church was kind of really big. FGL was coming up those couple years beforehand. Sam Hunt, Jake Owen, Zach Brown. A lot of those guys were like the big thing at the time. Bro Country was starting, and whatever you like or don't or dislike about it, there were things about it that caught my ear, and it was just what was a lot of my friends were playing, like, driving around in their trucks because going, around school then. And I also was dating a girl at the time that I met down there who did the student booking for, concerts on campus. I'll never forget Josh Thompson, who is a huge songwriter here now. He wrote Any Old Barstool for Jason Aldean, a lot of stuff for Thomas Rhett. He was an artist at that point, and he has one project out, but it's like one of my favorite records, and it was one of the first records I listened to, called Way Out Here. He came to campus on his fall tour my freshman year, and I remember seeing him, and I was, just floored. And my girlfriend at the time, I'd done some open mics on campus, and after we met, she's like, you really should do country music. And it just never occurred to me. But growing up doing rock and singer-songwriter stuff, like I love John Mayer, Springsteen, the Eagles, Queen. There's a lot of like rock, pop, to a certain extent, blues, jazz. Well, it all goes back to the blues actually. So rock, country, jazz, all that stuff, they're all siblings going back to the blues. So there's a lot of overlap. And when you think of like the heartland rock guys like Mellencamp or Springsteen, and then the Eagles, there's a lot of country crossover and influence there. So it's a natural fit once you find artists within that genre that you like. And so that's kind of what it was for me. I just found artists that I resonated with that I hadn't been exposed to growing up, because where I grew up, just people didn't listen to country music as much. And even though I now know there's a massive radio station in the Philadelphia area, 92.5 XTU, that serves that whole region. It's one of the biggest country stations in the country. So yeah, it was definitely just like being in a totally new place like Wake Forest in North Carolina. Just culture, I wouldn't say culture shock, but it was just very much a time of change and experiencing new things. And it was awesome. And it was really hugely formative, I think, for me to where I am now in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it seems like you're really starting to find yourself, and I can relate to seeing a band perform live that is a little bit outside of my box, so to speak, and you maybe get dragged to a bar or something. You're like, "Ah, I don't really care about this band or this opening act," and then you hear them, and you're like, maybe I was missing something here. And I think there might be a misnomer with some people with modern country music that everybody on the stage is of a similar background. And you could probably speak to this. It really couldn't be further from the truth. Like if you look at a drummer, a bass player, the singer, the main songwriter on stage, all four of those people might primarily listen to a different type of music, but they all coalesce to create that sound.
Yeah, no, I think the reality is my generation, which is give or take a few years, kind of the generation that's making waves and starting to like be at the forefront of the industry. We grew up with country as well as rock and hip hop and other influences. You know, John Mayer, for example, is I think a huge, just anybody that has picked up a guitar since he existed, kind of like with Taylor for girls too. And but I like a lot of Taylor Swift's old original country stuff as well, and I'm sure it was some amazing writers here. But I think that it's only natural that, because really genre is just something that was created for marketing purposes and for radio. And like I said, all these genres are brothers and or siblings, sisters, whatever you want to call it. So it's really, take Hardy for example, like he's like literally like doing metal now, and that's what his whole record, his recent record was, is about this two sides of him, the Mockingbird and the Crow. The Crow is like the darker side, the metal side that, you know, he was as his kid growing up, and that was very influential to him. But then the Mockingbird is like the country thing, that's the other side of him. And I really identify with that, you know, in terms of country is the foundation for what I do, and it's my passion and I love it, and it's the centering focus for me. But there's so many other great things to blend in, and I think that most country musicians you'll find nowadays have more diverse tastes and interests than you would expect, because there's just no boundaries, no genres. I think streaming's done a lot with that too, in terms of, you know, you can have a hip hop song and a country song on the same playlist, and then a jazz song, and it's all good. Duke Ellington has a famous quote that I believe is attributed to him that says, "There's only two types of music, good and bad," and I think that's really what it comes down to. But and by that same token, a lot of big artists aren't necessarily from the South. I mean, look at Keith Urban. He is from the South. He's from way south, Australia. And but then there's plenty of, you know, Shania Twain's Canadian. I met more Canadians in my life than Nashville than probably ever. I don't know if I even knew a single Canadian before I moved here. And there's so many down here that come down to write their songs, record their songs, and because there's a whole market up there. And the UK and I know the Nordic countries are very much growing in terms of their appetite for the country market. And Ed Sheeran, you know, has done some collaborations with Luke Combs, and he loves country music. He's talked about coming to record a record here. He has cuts with Tim McGraw and Faith Hill himself as a songwriter. So there's a song by Brantley Gilbert, which might have been his first hit, and I love that song, and I think it's so true. It's country must be countrywide, and I would even amend it to say country must be worldwide, because I think once people give it a chance, I think country is what rock used to be 40 years ago. You know, Tom Petty, the Eagles, Jackson Browne, all that stuff. Like, but then you also had stuff like the Beach Boys, and all the way to like harder stuff, maybe like AC/DC, and even up to metal and Metallica. Country is this like foundation that a lot of other genres are playing around in, and you can add different like subgenres of country. Like Sam Hunt is country, as is George Strait, but they are not the same kinds of country. But they can both exist, and that both have fans that call themselves country music fans that can like both, or maybe just like one of them. And I just think there's this great ability to, you know, honor its roots and also widen its appeal, that country, the space that it's in right now. So it's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but in agreeing with, or your statement rather, agreeing with you.
Well, just like you said, that's a great quote, and a good song is just a good song. And we live in a really diversified culture, much more so than the country music scene in the 1990s.
Yes.
Which seems like not that long ago, kind of was, but
doesn't, but it was, yeah.
There's a lot more opportunity to reach different types of people with your music. And people are curious, and they've got access, and they're on Spotify, and they can accidentally stumble upon something. And if it's a good song, you know, you just might grab somebody who wasn't an easy mark for your sound. And I see that in some of, you know, I might be jumping ahead a little bit here, but with the Salem Town project that you and Patrick Cornell
Hmm.
have put together. Just some of the songs, some of the themes, some of the artwork. It kind of speaks to a new audience.
Yeah, that was a very fun project that we did. We talked about how, there was bro country and all these different kinds of country. We kind of called it beat country because it was sort of Patrick's idea initially to kind of fuse these EDM kind of dance elements and electronic elements and very like even more poppier elements with country music that I hadn't even thought about going that far. And doing it in a duo was kind of like a safe way to be able to do that separately from my solo project. And I learned a lot from it. It was a really great experience, and love the songs that we made. And put out. It's stuff that I might have never done as myself, but helped me grow a lot as a writer and an artist. And I think when I describe Salem Town to people, I basically say like it's Chainsmokers if they did country music. So that's I think it's another example of the kind of diversity sonically that you can have in country music, but it still feels like country, and it's the lyrics certainly, and the vocal delivery, but it can be dressed up in a lot of different ways.
Now I want to talk about some of your solo material, which you're here to promote. And the new single is We Went South. Folks, go on Spotify, go on Apple Music, download it. Trust me on this one. Download one Dan Harrison track. And when you hear one, you're going to want to hear them all. Dan, one thing about We Went South, and I could kind of carve this up a lot of different ways, but I did go back and listen to the back catalog, and I see some real growth. The Dan Harrison package, I guess, what you have on display in the video and We Went South is just a guy, in my opinion, that has kind of that every guy appeal. You look like you're having fun. Your music, I feel like it taps into a feeling, an emotion, connects people with places and memories. Talk a little bit about where you were on your writing and recording, Nowhere Bar, Running Out of Radio, and then flash forward to the new stuff.
Well, the reality is that stuff it might be new to your ears in terms of the recording and being out there, but it's not actually. It was kind of written around a similar time. I think I wrote We Went South in 2021. It was early 2021, but some of the songs on the project, of which We Went South is a part, I'm putting out a bunch of new music over the next year. That song was the first single from, was written as early as 2019, kind of around the time that other stuff was put out. All of this stuff has, I moved to Nashville in April 2018, so everything has been written since I moved here. But some of the stuff that's coming out is fairly, I should say, it's not old, but it's not like recently written. And so that's just the kind of the funny thing with music, that sometimes things take a while to get out. Sometimes it happens pretty quickly. But in terms of the process, I mean, the goal, I love writing and I love telling stories. To me, it's always been the best way to communicate my thoughts and expressions and emotions in a way that can connect to people, because people's attention spans are short. And I just love the way music has this capacity to heighten the message or an emotion that you want to convey. And it can really hit people in a way that they might not, have really processed otherwise, if someone just told it to them or they saw it through some other medium. Now the side note is that sometimes you can hear a song in the wrong context and it won't hit you, and then you hear it again another time, or later in the day or something, or at a show, and you're like, whoa, that song's amazing, and you realize you'd heard it earlier. But that's another piece. But yeah, so We Went South was just me wanting to tell my story. I mean, the goal of this project was to have some songs that kind of talked about who I am and how I got to where I was. So that song, that's an expression, We went south, or things went south. Usually that's a negative thing, but I kind of wanted to turn that on its head and talk about the story of kind of what got me to Nashville. I tried to avoid using specific music industry or rock star musician imagery and language, because I find that those songs can sometimes pigeonhole you and people can't always relate to, or they just seem cheesy. But I think everyone can, not that there isn't a time and place for certain songs like that, but I think this song needed to be bigger than that. And so we couched it in everyone's had to move somewhere for a fresh start or chase a dream, and or taking a leap of faith, and that's kind of what that song was about. And I knew two people here when I moved here, and I slept on a friend's couch for the first 2 weeks, and didn't know anything. And not that I know everything now, but I know 5 years worth of things, and it's just amazing to see when I look back on what I've done in the last 5 years, and just gets me really excited about what I'm going to do in the next 5. So
I love the theme of the song because 10 years ago I took a shot. I moved to Pensacola, Florida, and I didn't know anybody except
You went south too.
I went south too. Yeah. And I maybe knew my girlfriend's friend and then the guy that she was dating, and then I didn't know anybody after we broke up, and but it was all good. So I really like the theme of this song. I like how descriptive that your story is. And one of the lines that sticks out to me is didn't want to waste any more time.
Didn't want to waste any more time.
People can relate to that where they've been sitting on an idea, whether, man, I want to move to Nashville. Man, really want to move to Atlanta. I got friends in Atlanta, or like me down to the Gulf Coast, and you feel like you've spent 5 or 6 years chewing on it. Just want to tell my listeners, if you've got that bug in your ear or you've got that dream, go follow it. It's never too late, even if you're 25, 35, or 45.
Yeah, it's definitely never too late, and it's never going to go away until you do it.
I think in our first couple messages with each other, I told you the songs that I liked, and the Nowhere Bar track in particular, and the video. The video is just a blast. Take me through. I wanted to ask you a question as far as making videos. It looks like you're having fun. It must be a lot of work. Are you having as much fun as it looks like?
Yeah, I think I am in the moment. Sometimes it can be stressful because you want to make sure you get the shot or you're not running out of daylight. And so, I'm not a trained actor, although I that definitely is in my family, and I want to take some acting classes, I think. But it's definitely it's always fun. It's especially when you have friends there. That was the funnest part about the Nowhere Bar videos. I had a lot of friends there, kind of in the crowd in the bar scene. So yeah, we made it look like it was at night because the way the sun was, but it was actually really early in the morning because that was when they let us use the bar before anyone was in. So we were all very tired, but it was a fun time. So yeah, it's making those are always fun, especially when you have a fun concept behind it.
Everybody can be brought back to that moment, whether it happened last weekend and you're wondering what happened, if you should have said something different to that girl that you met or what, or if it happened 10 years ago. Everybody's got an experience like that.
Well, that was the hope, and I appreciate that. It's funny that video was made so DIY and 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm proud of it. But it's just to see the growth is fun too. It's one I very look back on it very fondly, but also it's a very clear metric of like how far I've come and still am going. I think in a good way.
Exactly, and you put that head to head with We Went South or Crazy About Country. Crazy About Country. I really like this song, Dan. I play drums, and one of the first things I noticed was, my gosh, listen to that drum sound.
Yeah, that's all my producer or the producer of that song, Robbie. He's killer, man. I mean, my co-writers, other co-writers on that song, Adam Sickler and Elise Yulo, they helped with production as well. So that's I got to give them credit for that. They found the right sounds, and Robbie put it all together and mixed it too, and just made it really hit and sound great.
Some of the lyrics too, this is where I feel like I can connect a little bit with your story. I didn't grow up listening to country music, so some of these lyrics speak to me. Sometimes it takes a girlfriend or accidentally hearing something to get into the genre. I just happened to be in a workplace where two guys were playing Pandora all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only Kenny Chesney channel or Jason Aldean or Eric Church station or something like that. And so I was kind of force-fed a lot of this music the first week. And then I don't know what song it was. It may have been Zac Brown Band. It may have been something like Knee Deep because I do like Jimmy Buffett. I thought, okay, that's all right. And then I heard it just got into my diet a little bit more. And I started to listen a little deeper to the music. And that was a big turning point for me where I realized you don't have to box yourself in to just rock, just hip hop, that sort of thing. So yeah, did you kind of have that in mind writing this song?
Well, this song I put out in March, and it was I kind of consider it sort of like the sister song or the B side to Nowhere Bar, both sonically and kind of in story in some ways. But it was just again telling the story about how I kind of got into country music, and it was because of a girl, and that was definitely the goal to show like, hey, like, yeah, this is not what I started with, but I really connected with it, and here's why. And so hopefully that I got that across. But there's obviously like other musical influences in there too. the biggest key for me, whatever I'm doing, is authenticity. And I'm never going to pretend to be something I'm not. I love country music and I'm a fan and I'm a country music artist. That doesn't mean I was born on a farm, raised on a farm, anything like that. And I'm very clear about that. So hopefully that's clear, but the passion and sort of intensity of how much I care about the genre is still clear. And you don't have to have been born and raised on a farm or to appreciate and relate to country music.
Absolutely. Like we were saying earlier, it's okay to step in, even though your last memory of trying out country music didn't go so well or you didn't feel like you fit in. Give it another shot. If you're listening to this episode, look up Dan's catalog. Dan, one other thing I wanted to mention here is that you do have songwriting credits. All Hat, No Cowboy by Bells.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that one a little bit. That's got, what, 4 million downloads?
Yeah, it went viral on TikTok big time for Kelly and her project. And that was a super fun song to write. That was just one of those songs that came together pretty quickly in the room. I wrote it with actually my producer and who produced all the stuff. We Went South and all the stuff that's coming out. And he also wrote Nowhere Bar with me back in the day. And it was just a lot of fun. It was me, him, and Kelly, who's Bells. And it was actually on Zoom. It was during the pandemic, and that was our first write together. I had never met Kelly in person, but I'd obviously known Andrew for a while. And we got set up on the write, and I think Andrew and I had talked about this idea at some point before, and she just liked it and thought it was funny because we were just talking about how I had just mentioned earlier in our conversation that about authenticity, because of the tourist kind of thing here that Nashville has now is big business. And a lot, you can tell a tourist a mile away if they're, most of the time, if they're wearing cowboy hat and just really overt kind of like country apparel, or they're on Broadway and matching stuff. Like, so there's a lot of like counterfeit cowboy, I like to call it. And that's kind of what that song was about, was just calling out. It's meant to be fun and lighthearted. It's not really like bad to do that, but just to show that there's a difference. The boots don't make the man, as they say, which is another song title that I've written. But that was the kind of idea, and we just kind of came together pretty quickly in the session, and it was a ton of fun. And Kelly killed it. The song sounds great, and it's been a very big song for her in terms of the doors it's opened, and we're very thankful for that.
Well, Dan, when you're spending a few years writing these songs, recording these songs, putting a lot of your heart and soul into it, what are some things that you do day to day, week to week, to just keep your head in the game? You haven't blown up across the globe yet, and you've got high aspirations,
Mm-hmm.
big dreams. Do you have to keep yourself motivated, or are you just, hey, man, I'm having fun doing this, and whatever happens next is great?
It's a bit of both. I mean, I like to say my worst day in Nashville is better than my best day anywhere else, which is true. But that doesn't mean there still aren't fun things, or there's always tough things. Even if you're chasing your dream or in your dream job, there's stuff that isn't fun, and sometimes you can get overwhelmed. When I first started moving here, when I first moved here, I was writing 2 and 3 times a day. And we take about anywhere from 2 to 4 hours for a writing session. So do the math. Part of that's like the 10,000 hours. You got to put in the time. And I'd only written like maybe less than a dozen songs before I moved to town. It's just not something I thought about or did. I knew that's why I moved here. I knew I need to be the best artist I could be. I needed to be the best songwriter I could be. And I just hadn't found my voice, literally and figuratively, because I just didn't, it's just not the culture and the thing that I was surrounded by and even knew about. It was amazing to get the opportunity to kind of like workshop and put in all those hours, but eventually it got to a point where I was getting burned out, and you got to be like, hey, like, I love writing. I'm always going to do that, but I can still write 1 song a day. Sometimes I don't, and so, sometimes I don't have to write a song like that day. Like today, I didn't write a song. I did other things that were also beneficial and important to my music career. Like, if I was just pursuing songwriting, that'd be one thing, but I'm also trying to put out music under an artist project. And, I play guitar for other artists as well. And there's time for social media, time for learning the songs and like practicing. Like, there's a lot of things that I need to be doing with music also. And songwriting is an amazing thing, but if I don't give myself space from it when I need to, it can feel like a chore, and I don't ever want it to feel like a chore. There's sometimes it's just kind of unavoidable, but this is my passion, this is my dream, this is what I love. So I want to show up to work every day, quote unquote, excited. And I would say 99.9% of the time I am. It's just, you have to, and for everyone it's different. I know some friends of mine who are killing it, and they write 2 and 3 times a day, and they love it, and that's just what they do, and it is all different. But some of the greatest songwriters I've ever heard and know, and that have huge cuts and big number ones, they only write a couple times a week, and maybe they like early on had really front loaded and did a lot, but it kind of just depends on what works for you. And for me, I just realized that like I need to have balance. If I'm not like sleeping and not doing other things I enjoy in my life that actually also feed the well for ideas for me to write. Nothing gets me more excited when I come up with an idea that I'm really excited to go write, because then that just takes care of the inspiration and the vibe right away. The hardest part of the song is getting it started, but if you're already like, oh, I have this killer idea, this is how we're gonna do it, like I'm hearing this melody, blah blah blah, that just takes so much of the work out of the way and or the effort, and it's still a process to execute the song. But we all want that inspiration, and it's a balance of showing up to work every day so you're keeping fresh for when inspiration hits and sharp, but also not dulling yourself by kind of just hammering it too much. So I think it's a bit of both for me is the short answer to your question. So I love what I do. I'm so blessed that I get to do it, and I hope to continue to keep growing it and get to a higher and higher level, so I don't have to do anything else to live, that I can just do this. And
I think that was a great way of putting it, where you got to be careful with your craft and what you love, because you just don't want it to start feeling like work.
you never want that. And so I really try, and especially as I've gotten older, it's like I want to be able to enjoy life, exercise, sleep, socialize. It all goes together. It really does. It feeds the well for inspiration and creativity.
That's and sometimes on these episodes I'll kind of hit on a very general theme, like you just said, sleep. I think sometimes people who are going after something, and they're just hard workers in general, type A, and they feel like I can stay up till 2 in the morning, I can get back up at 5, I can go for a run, and then I could do this. And you might be able to do that for a little while, but you may not be at your creative best. So I like what you said there, probably trying to pay attention to what you eat a little bit.
Trying, yeah, and that's all obviously tricky, and if you're on a budget, and certainly when you're on the road, like that's the biggest thing that I haven't been on the road for a super sustained period of time, but I've done a bunch of different runs with other bands, and for like just one-off gigs, and it's really hard to like maintain routine when you're on the road like that, and it's critical to find the things that work for you, and not eat, and it's really easy to eat terribly too, so that's super important.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Have you had friends that stay on the road for a few months, they come back, and you don't want to say anything to them, but you're like, man, you kind of look a little rough there, or I mean,
that I can think of in a super noticeable way yet, but like I just know what they tell me, and they're just exhausted, and that's the reality. Like touring is a really great thing, but it's so hard. It is probably the hardest thing to do, and it's sort of the last piece of the puzzle in terms of artist development, like to be able to go on tour and have an enterprise that has the logistics in place, and the financial durability, and that there's enough money coming in and going out to be able to put on something like that. There's just so many moving pieces, and to do it right, there's plenty of bands that just like kind of go by the skin of their teeth, and it's about exposure, but that's not really the world we live in anymore. Like, of course, if you get on like a big tour as an opener, like that's cool, but I think it's important to be strategic whenever you can, not in terms of so much so that there's decision paralysis or you overanalyze everything. But I've thought about that myself a lot, which is why I've tried to be careful with shows, and part of it is also like you said, I haven't hit it yet, and it's easier to sell tickets when you have things people want to come see you. So, but yeah, it's a balance either way, whatever level you're at. If you're kind of like trying to break in, or if you're at a Morgan Wallen, Luke Combs, whatever kind of level, there's still balance and things you got to do to keep your sanity when you're on the road for that long, and stay healthy, because it's not easy.
well, like I said earlier, as far as just trying to reach a broader audience, and I've connected with the songs. I want to reemphasize, I'm not just saying this because it's another Dan on the show, and I'm gonna love whatever you do, folks. When I started playing these songs, I had an instant connection to them, and I was talking to Dan earlier before we got started about some of the guitar licks in Nowhere Bar, and I'm thinking they didn't really have to do that. That was kind of cool. That was a cool little accent there, And and then I went back and watched the videos, and I encourage everybody, if you find a song you like, whether it's Crazy About Country or We Went South, pair it up with the video, and you're going to be wanting to hear some new music from Dan. I think, Dan, you got the goods, and I hope that this episode helps you reach a few more people from across the country, maybe some people that don't even live in a hotbed area for this type of music, but they've realized, hey, I kind of like some of this stuff. Follow that feeling, lean into that. This is me speaking to the listeners. But Dan, we've been talking for a while. We could go on and on. I don't want to tie you up all night, and I would love to see you perform live, but I understand it is a unique challenge this day and age to pull that off.
It's not impossible. And I play shows all the time in town. It's definitely not possible. It's just to do, a tour is different from a show, if that makes sense. But if you're ever in Nashville, let me know. And obviously, if I'm announcing stuff outside, going on the road, you will definitely see, and whoever follows me on social media will see.
Now, I saw that you guys did play a festival this past summer, the Barefoot Country Music Fest.
Correct. Yeah, that was great because that was back in my hometown. Well, near Philly. It was at the Jersey Shore, so pretty much a hometown show, and it was really awesome. That's flying out there and getting all that taken care of. So it's an endeavor, but it's obviously worth it. And to have family and friends come see me, and it was great.
Okay, Dan. Well, hey, I'll always wrap up with just some off the wall questions.
Sure.
Okay, being from Philadelphia, are you rooting for the Phillies in the playoffs?
Of course. I just heard that they were in the wild card recently. I haven't been keeping up with it much this season, but I'm very glad, obviously. I mean, hopefully we can win some kind of championship this year. We were in the World Series last year and the MLS Finals and the Super Bowl, and we didn't win a single thing. So that's always heartbreaking. I feel like Philly sports were always like in the mix, and every now and then we get it, but not as much as we should.
How do you feel about Travis Kelce? I guess he and Taylor are a pair.
Yeah, I mean, good for him, but I wish he was dating his brother so the Eagles were getting that effect, I saw somewhere Mark Cuban I think posted on Twitter online, someone sent it to me and said, "Hey, Taylor, whenever you guys break up, I got a lot of handsome single rich guys on the Mavericks for you." So because he owns the Dallas Mavericks, no, I think it's amazing. We love her or hate her, her power is undeniable, and it's really, really incredible. And if I could even have a fraction of that, it's not about fame, it's just a fraction of that sort of influence, and people listening to what I do and wanting to hear my music, that would be incredible.
Well, I think that you'll get there. I really do. I think it's just a matter probably of somebody speaking up for you and introducing you, another musician, saying, "Hey, all you guys who listen to me, you need to check out Dan Harrison." I keep returning to you giving what I would say clearance to guys and girls who didn't grow up listening to country. And then on top of that, you've got an authenticity that comes across in your songwriting and in the videos.
Well, I appreciate it, man. That means a lot, and because that's certainly the intention.
Okay, Dan, favorite ice cream flavor?
Probably cookies and cream, but I find myself having vanilla or mint, one of those two, mint chocolate chip. But I find myself having vanilla a lot just because it's a really good base for, if you want to mix it with anything.
Dan, did you ever have a gerbil? Did you ever have a guinea pig? Did you ever have a little turtle or mouse or something?
I did have two turtles, actually. At one point, I don't remember why I got them or when. It was, I had to have been kindergarten, first grade. And I remember they were named Bob and David, and very creative names. And they died at some point. I don't remember why or what. I think I fed them. So they were very, very tiny, though.
I had a hamster one time, and I came back from vacation. We were gone for a week. I came back, and my dog had eaten it.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Whoa.
That was not nice.
That was. I don't like that.
Dan, what's something you like to watch when you're just trying to decompress and you're like, all right, I'm gonna put something on?
Arrested Development. That's I've seen that so many times. So in terms of something to throw on that I don't need to think too hard about and I can kind of come in and out of, definitely something like that, or like a Family Guy or South Park, comedy shows like that. But I'm a big Star Wars guy too, so I love throwing on any of those things. And I'm kind of in the midst of watching Clone Wars and Rebels and all those things, all the animated stuff from the expanded universe that I actually didn't watch. Like I always loved Star Wars and watched all the movies, but I just never got into I just didn't like the CGI, I think, when it first came out, but I like once you get used to it, and it's really great stuff, and a lot of the stuff that they're putting out is kind of now is kind of inspired by that era. So like the Ahsoka show that's out right now. So it's cool to dive back into that and kind of get the backstory.
Well, Dan, this has been terrific. I got a bunch of other questions, but we'll save it for another time. Would you come back on the show long after you've made it to the top and left this episode in the dust? Would you still remember Dan time?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, and I hope you're right up there with Joe Rogan by that time. Yeah, absolutely. Would love to.
All right. Well, thanks for making time here, Dan. This has been a pleasure. And folks, remember, if you're in a rut, you feel like there's something bigger out there for you, if you feel like you've been in this town long enough and you're tired of the cold, you're tired of the snow, and go put a plan together and get out. If you just want to move across town, if you want to leave that dead end job, stop thinking about it, do it. Dan, I wish you nothing but the best. I wish you all the success in the world, and thanks for appearing on the show.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I do. Thank you.
All right. Anything else you'd like to plug? I didn't mention the website, but I will link it. Any podcast or anything you'd like to plug as far as Dan Harrison music?
I'm putting out another new song in a couple weeks. I haven't announced it yet, but I'm going to be announcing it very soon. I think by the time, I don't know when you'll have this podcast out, but it might already like be out or at least, announced. It's called So Far So Good, and it's another song that's kind of about my story. Yeah, so I'm putting that out soon, and I got a bunch of new music coming out next year as well. I'm really excited about, and just keeping the train rolling and hopefully snowballing everything.
Full steam ahead.
Yep.
All right. Well, you guys have a great week, and we will see you next Sunday on Dan Time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hey, if you really enjoyed that episode, please take a minute to download and subscribe. You can follow us on any of the social media pages. The new YouTube channel has all the prior episodes and the Friday Challenge videos. Coming soon for any of my listeners who may be hearing impaired, I will also have full transcripts of each episode, and I'll be adding chapters to each episode as well. I appreciate a 5-star review, but hey, what really helps the show is just you talking about it. Talk about it with your friends, your coworkers, send a group text to people you know, and I really appreciate your support. Thanks, and have a great week.